Hello and welcome to the Gaming Malta panel. I am joined by Ivan, Corinne and Steve. So let's set the scene here. When you compare the early days of iGaming in Malta to today's industry, what would you say are the biggest differences?
Well, really, what we've seen is a growth, right? A substantial growth. So when Malta joined the EU in 2004, we were the first European jurisdiction to regulate the iGaming sector. And what happened since then is the industry accounts for about 7% of our GVA, 14,000 employees. So the growth has been substantial. But most of the iGaming operators are on the island. And I think what the major change is, rather than growth, is the operators consolidating their presence on the island. And also looking at organic growth through acquisitions and mergers, etc. And we're seeing some interesting business also coming, from the UK. So due to tax, changes in the UK, essentially. But really, it's a sum of all the parts. It isn't a silver bullet, right? We're seeing more companies doing innovation, more companies doing responsible gaming, which to us is very important. But ultimately, this is an industry which provides entertainment. And what we want to do is ensure that the entertainment is done in a very responsible way also.
And what are your thoughts, Corinne?
I mean, much of the same. I think we have to look at sort of the before and after, what it looks like now versus to what it looks like then. I would say the biggest difference is the profile of the operators that is on the island. I would say in the beginning, obviously, because the gaming industry was in the very early stages, back in 2004, 2006, 8, 10. I think you had a lot of sort of startups, B2Cs, starting to get into the industry, backed up by something which actually the Maltese regulator identified very, very early on, which is that platforms are also a big thing to look out for, and the MGA, the LGA at the time, was actually handing out licenses to business providers as well, to platform providers as well. Nowadays, you do see this move towards technology, of course, because there are a number of there's such a good ecosystem built up in Malta based on what Ivan just said, that there's a surge of the need of technology to set itself up in Malta because of that ecosystem that has been created.
And what about you, Steve?
Well, I think over 20 years ago, when it first started, it was a series of entrepreneurs that were rather fragmented in their approach. But what you've seen over those 20 years is exponential growth. And what you have now is a very sophisticated ecosystem, both in the technology and labour markets. And I don't think any other jurisdiction in the world has quite got what Malta's got to offer in that respect. It's been a really fast and interesting journey.
And I think it's worth noting as well that we used to talk of an array of jurisdictions, whether that was the whitelist territories or the Caribbean ones. Malta is one of the very few that feels it has stayed a key industry hub. So what did the island get right? What do you think, in your view?
I think undoubtedly is, first of all, there always has been cross-political support on the island from government, right? So from a government perspective, it was always put as a priority industry for the island. I happen to chair the iGaming Council for Government, right, on the board. And on the board, I've got the Minister of the Economy with me. And now when the operators meet across that table, we're giving them, I would say, a first-hand approach at the policymaker, which not many jurisdictions do that, right? So that's extremely important. We give, for example, things like visas and residence agency and residency processes, etc. We have, as Gaming Malta, a relationship manager based within that agency, to specifically help, the iGaming companies to go over any hurdles, around that. So it's been a real support and embracing all that. coming to today, where the government has launched its Vision 2050, and gaming is embedded within that vision. So it's no fluffy dream, but there are KPIs on that, and the KPI is basically consolidate the industry and look at the broader church of gaming, which is video game development, esports, and immersive tech. And there's been this continuous, I think what we got right is this continuous relentless approach to ensure that the iGaming companies are not in a hub or in a center, but they're at a home. And that we understand much, of the challenges also which they face ultimately.
What do you think, Corinne?
I think, back to your question, as in why was Malta actually so successful? I think we underestimated at the time. We did not realize how groundbreaking the regulation actually was. The first regulation in Malta, which was the first you could say in the world, was so forward-looking, so technology neutral. It allowed business to grow. It actually identified concepts of regulation, which we still use today. It put them down on a piece of paper, and you still read regulations nowadays, new regulations in Europe, big jurisdictions, big states, and they're still, talking about the player protection concepts, which were set up back in 2004. So I think that was one of the best things about Malta, and how it differentiated itself actually from the Caribbean jurisdictions, which it still competes with today, of course, on very different levels. But that's I think what really singled it out. And I cannot not mention what Ivan mentioned, that's the cross-governmental support that the gaming industry has always had, because obviously our objectives, Malta's objectives to regulate gaming are very differently motivated to those that are set up in .country regulations, so the .country jurisdictions.
And what are your thoughts, Steve?
I think residing in the UK, I've got a sort of interesting perspective as an outsider looking in. It's got a lot of things right. I would say that it's very hard on itself internally. It's very wary of its proposition and how it puts that about. But I think it's unique in many ways. One, sitting in Europe, but two, the fact that you've got largely politically, it's very stable in terms of its approach to the gaming market and what that means is essentially GDP. You've got a supportive government, people like Gaming Malta and Ivan, the MGA, who at least you can have a dialogue with. In contrast, in the UK, trying to get sensible dialogue with any parties is extremely difficult, whereas you might not always get the answer you want with Malta, but you can at least have a dialogue and you feel as though you've been heard. I'm sure Corinne thinks this as an operator. You can approach directly with regards to that, and I think that's how they've been able to grow this established ecosystem that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world.
Was there something you wanted to add there?
I think adding to that, the most important thing that we should be doing is also now is that we don't rest on our laurels, right? There's such an ever-changing environment, from geopolitics at the moment to regulatory also. And one thing which I preach about, is my mission, is that we remain relentless in our approach. And I think it's very important. The minute we start getting comfortable is when we start getting issues, right? And I want to make sure that us as a jurisdiction, we continue to look at ways we could innovate, trying to understand also the marketplace, and the industry where it's going, essentially, and adapt accordingly. That would be vital to future-proof and consolidate also the industry.
Now, country regulation has become the norm rather than the exception. What keeps Malta strategically relevant for operators?
Well, I think all of the factors which we've already mentioned are keeping it strategically relevant, right? Because Malta has positioned itself properly. It was there from the very early stages. It has always opened dialogue with the operators. I mentioned the regulation in 2004. In 2015, we started discussing the new regulation. the second version of the regulation, it is now much more sort of much hitting the touch points in a more sort of appropriate and reasonable way. So it is getting to the operators. It is listening. It is innovating itself. So I think that makes it very very central to the whole sort of success of Malta's story. But also there's obviously the wider aspect, right? The fact that we mentioned Gaming Malta, all the work that Gaming Malta is doing, together with all the different echelons in the Maltese government to make sure that we still remain attractive as a jurisdiction, obviously within what is obviously within the power of a jurisdiction like Malta, but whatever can be done is being done. So that makes it sort of still a good recipe. I have more sort of comments about what we could expect in the future, but I'll leave my other colleagues first to.
Yeah, over to you, Steve.
I think it's about some of its parts. The .com market is not what it once was. But as I said before, sitting within Europe, having stability is important for operators. You rarely get any knee-jerk reactions in Malta that's discussed and decided upon after that discussion. Other jurisdictions, you frequently see knee-jerk reactions from politicians. So I think that's important. Equally, as the labour base is built up, then you're able to get cross-fertilisation with regards different industries now. So you can pull on a wider resource of people, and that skill set has moved up substantially over the last 20 years. So I think it's a number of things. It's not, you can't just look in isolation at the licensing issue.
And I think just picking up to what Steve is saying also, the talent factor is important, right? So there's this war for talent, essentially, and this is something that we need to continue to build on. We actually have, once again, probably one of the few jurisdictions where we have actually iGaming degree programs within our vocational colleges, right? So that would be important. And then, as we're saying, is the cross-fertilization of other industries, which I call the convergence of technology. So you're looking at esports, for example, and iGaming. You're looking at video game development, and how all these combine together, because it's all working as one, essentially, and we'll keep on pushing for that.
And from an operator's perspective specifically, what does Malta get right in the dialogue between the regulator and the industry that others could learn from, do you think?
Well, it's not about getting it right, it's about the fact that they simply listen. So, we hold licenses in a number of jurisdictions worldwide, and Malta is one of the only ones where we can actually pick up the phone and talk to a human being and have a discussion about a new proposal, a new initiative, about something that's going wrong, something that's happening in another state that we need to address. There are a few now. I would say some of the LATAM jurisdictions are taking quite an open approach as well, which is really, really positive. There are some other regulators in Europe as well. I would say 3 or 4 off the top of my head that are ready to listen. But I think that's the main thing, that they are open to listen, and they are open to change, and they know that what's good at the moment is not going to be good in 5 years' time, and they need to keep on working at it.
Ben?
No. This is it. And that's why, as cliche as it sounds, the only constant is change, and we have to be ready for it. And we are, when you look at, one of the main challenges we have is that the, other different European jurisdictions are having their own regulatory regimes, right? So we're not the only ones in the game here. And this is where the ecosystem comes in, ultimately. And this is where, the solutions lie. So when even on our Gaming Malta booth here at ICE, it's Make It in Malta. And Make It in Malta because we've got one of Malta's largest banks on our stand, Bank of Valletta, because that offers another financial solutions. We have Malta Enterprise, which is the government foreign direct investment arm. And that's a very clear signal to everybody is that we don't only have a quality license, which is a quality kite mark, right? But also there's all this value chain which is working to basically enhance your operations on the island.
Anything to add to that, Steve?
I think wearing my operator's hat, we're never happy. They never get it right fully, but Malta perhaps does things better than a lot of other places, I think. It's just, I think things like Ivan mentioned about the iGaming Council, they're important forums to be able to bring either policy issues, and it's policy issues that generally drive a lot of our thinking with regards to iGaming. So being able to have a seat at the table in those areas is increasingly important, as it's been denied in many other jurisdictions.
One thing, may just allow me to add, is also we're working very closely with the operators on a reputation management exercise, for the industry. The industry gets a lot of bad flack in the media, but what we're doing is what's all here around us at us. It's entertainment, essentially, and we need to ensure, and even with Malta, that we're looking over, it's quality over quantity. We want to have the reputable operators on the island. And respect is all about going outside to the world, the external stakeholders, telling them, look, the industry is about responsible gaming. The industry is about entertainment, it's speed, it's great product, it's enhanced due diligence, it's consistency and it's talent. That's what the industry stands for. And when we see, operators like Betsim, who are, I would say, a relative institution on the island, right? When it comes to the iGaming sector, over 1,000 employees. I dare say, put it right, many of people who used to work at Betsim today have moved on and they have started their own operations also. So this is really exciting for us to see and see this growth, right? But it's the industry also needs to work hard at their own reputation. Steve, we need to show the world, the European institutions, the banking stakeholders, that we're all about quality and diversity within the workforce, right? And how we project ourselves. That's vital. And Malta will be a supporting act in that, and a real ally to the industry for that.
Now let's talk about the missteps in Malta's approach and what you think those are and what has been done to rectify those missteps.
I would say that the missteps that we could potentially talk about are actually sort of a result of what Ivan has just been talking, right? Because we have a situation where we had a regulator which is sort of, in many ways, was at the forefront of the industry in many ways. A regulator coming out, of a small country in the Mediterranean that until then not many actually knew about. They were to some extent teaching, the regulators that started to come out in later years, the elitists, the elite group of regulators, and in some ways perhaps over the years, and not immediately, but over the years, I would say the MGA always wanted to sort of prove its worthiness also with those regulators, still being a member of the European Union, and obviously keeping up the standards that demands. And in some cases, I would say that when certain regulators who had very different motivations and very different starting points to the Maltese regulator started to, encroach on the way the industry was developing in a bid to protect consumers, all well-intentioned, well-intentioned regulation, well-intentioned enforcement, but having such an effect to the industry, and I feel in those few instances where Malta sort of in a bid to do the same, that's where I guess its failures in a way started to come out and started to show a few years back. But I think they're coming back from that. I think they've recognized that Malta, needs to establish its own profile. It's different. You cannot compare it to the dot country regulators in Europe. You cannot compare it to the Caribbean regulators that we mentioned at the beginning. It's in a place of its own. It's setting up an ecosystem of its own. it has a regulation of its own, it has a reputation of its own, which we really need to sort of take care of, and it's striking that balance between, making sure that we are really encouraging business, the industry to grow. I dare say that Malta is almost responsible partly for the success and failures of the industry over the years. I think as long as Malta continues to recognize that it has a very special position and role to play in the industry at large, it can continue to grow. It can continue to sort of get out of what possibly could have brought it down.
Who would like to take that question
I think
next?
really perception is the thing. I would say Malta has a tendency to look at itself as a small island in the Mediterranean and not the huge player it is in iGaming. It's up there with the giants in terms of that. It's very self-critical of itself, in terms very sensitive to any criticism on the island and reactive to that. But I think one of the things I keep saying is it needs to look outward. A lot of it, the net worth driven through Malta comes from outside, and it needs to be more outgoing and outward looking in terms of how it perceives itself and how it presents itself. So I think whilst it's grown massively, I still think there's a greater opportunity in that respect to create this different perception of either what's believed within Malta or let more people know about the success story outside.
And the same question to you, Ivan.
I would say, rather than missteps, it's recognizing and hearing both Corinne and Steve, talking, something, recognizing the responsibility we have as a jurisdiction for the sector, and also underpinned with us being a European jurisdiction. While we're doing that, we're part of Europe, gives us also a sense of responsibility in ensuring that we work within the European framework and the European values, essentially. So it's that understanding that any movements which happen in Malta could affect the industry, globally, and this from a little island in the mid. So rather than the actual missteps, it's this continuous, ensuring that we're very responsible in seeing the way the industry grows.
We could stay here and discuss this all day, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming in. We look forward to seeing what the future holds for Malta.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.